want to thank everyone for joining us today for Inspira Advantage's webinar on how to balance application, school, and life, which is, a massive hurdle. We have two fantastic Inspira Advantage consultants with us today who are experts on the med school admissions process and work with clients to help them apply to med school. Inspira Advantage is an admissions consulting company, and we work with aspiring med students and everything in the med field from, PA, veterinary, dental, medicine, nursing, and help them plan for their application, help them decide where they want to apply to med school, help with personal statements, MCAT prep, really every part of the application process. And we also do that for residency as well. I want to thank you all for joining us this morning. All right, so today we're going to introduce our panelists. We'll talk about why finding a balance is essential for pre-med students. We'll talk about what you'll need, what you'll need to tackle as a pre-med student. And then we'll go over some tips and tricks, and we'll open things up for a Q&A. So we have Mohammed and Austin here with us today. Mo, can you introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my name's Mo Hisru. I'm now in my 5th year of radiation oncology residency at OHSU, but I did most of my schooling in New York. I went to Columbia for undergrad and then stayed at Mount Sinai for medical school, where I helped as a 4th year medical student to review applications and formed part of the application committee for medical school acceptance.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
Austin, do you want to introduce yourself for us?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Austin Johnson. I'm a 4th year out of 5 years at Stanford. So I'm taking research here right now. I originally am from a very small town in Colorado, went to the University of Denver, and California is the first state I've kind of lived outside of that. So like Mo, I kind of stuck around the area that I knew the best. And right now I'm gearing up to apply into dermatology. I'm doing some research in that field, but I love this side of medicine the most, is talking to people and those who are going to be our future colleagues. So.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you both so much for being here. We're excited to have you and learn as much as we can. So we'll dive right in and talk about why finding a balance is essential as a pre-med student. Austin, do you want to start us off here?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that everyone in attendance here knows the path that they're about to go down is fraught with a ton of things to think about all at once. You're going to be juggling everything from your typical prereqs, whatever your school sets out on that, all the way up to studying for that big MCAT test and everything in between. So when you approach something like this, as with anything in life that's complicated and has a ton of stages, it's really, really important to have a game plan there so you don't feel overwhelmed. And I think diving into this topic, hopefully we don't make you feel overwhelmed just by talking about it, but by starting this conversation, hopefully you're able to get a plan in place so that when that tidal wave comes, you're ready for it.
Yeah, that's great. I don't really have much to add there. I think that, having some sort of a plan, as Austin mentioned, and specifically that's kind of time-based, so that for this month what you should be doing, and kind of building in time for yourself and for your family and for other things will go a really long way into making sure that you get everything that you need to get done while not feeling like you don't have time for anything else.
Fantastic.
This is a fantastic time to start to think about the ways in which that you work best, and the things in your life that you need and or want to have around in the long run, and start to build that into your life now. because everything that you're experiencing now, all of those feelings of stress and of trying to sort of fit everything into your life with the finite amount of time that you have, it's something that's going to continue. It'll be here in this application cycle, and there'll be another application cycle later, and another one later, and it kind of just continues. And so, and you've already been doing it. This isn't something brand new to you. Of course, to get to where you are right now, you've already experienced some of these things. And so to sort of frame it as, hey, this is something that I'm going to need to continue to improve at, because it's going to happen again and again. So why don't I take the time now to say, how do I do this best for me? And to include the things in your life, that are helpful to you, and work in the ways that are helpful to you. For example, in group settings or solo settings, or both combined. That's generally what I prefer. But that sort of thing about building it in to your life now is really going to help for each successive application cycle that you'll have.
I think Mo hit it on the head there, and he's, obviously by his background, he's nearest to the light at the end of the tunnel there, and he's been able to succeed at that level, and you can tell that he's still like passionate about things. And that's the thing, I think this webinar is like making sure that you don't lose that passion and become jaded and become burnt out. And in that sense, it's really important to have habits in place, because you cannot consciously manage everything every day. That's just not how your brain was built. You want to make some things automatic so that you can continue progressing while continuing to build on those habits as well. So it's really important to start considering doing the things that are going to give you sustainability in this long and arduous path that you nonetheless are destined to be on.
Fantastic.
So I think this slide kind of builds right off of the habit formation, because that is part of that solid foundation that allows you to have a life outside of school, outside of volunteering, outside of research, and outside of studying. And in the end, obviously Mo has expertise on this because he's been through the most of it, but you'll only get busier, believe it or not. And that's not meant to scare you, but it is meant to give you that impetus to start building habits and building that solid foundation that will allow you to continue being busier while not necessarily decreasing the amount of balance that you have in your life.
Right. Nope, that's absolutely true. And I think that the more that you find out the ways in which you work best, the more productive and time efficient that you'll be. So as one example, I find that I really write best when I'm alone in the room, even having someone else like not speaking to me that's in the room. I can't focus as well. And so whether it's a personal statement for an application or a patient note for the chart, either way, I prefer to be alone. Now, sometimes you can't always have, those kind of work situations exactly as you like them to be. But even knowing that helps me to, when I can, have that in my life as much as I can. And that'll help you where, when things kind of get busier later on, as Austin said, because they do continue to get busier, that like, hey, I really work best doing this particular task like this. And so you can kind of, organize your life in a way where you're allowed that time to do it, so you can kind of get it done and move on to other things.
I think that's great advice for, all of life. So we're going to talk about some of the things that you're going to need to tackle as a pre-med student, and as you work your way up to applying to med school.
So I think this is going to go into more detail about that first slide that we kind of talked about. And of course, one of the biggest and most obvious things is the coursework that you're going to encounter throughout your years in undergrad. And it is should be one of the top priorities when it comes to your pre-med career, just because achieving academic excellence is an objective measure that many admissions committees use to help understand who you are as a potential future doctor and undergoing the academic rigors of medicine. So it is really important to know that like it's going to be difficult coursework, everything from organic chemistry to physics and everything in between there that your school requires. But in order to get that high GPA, you need to find balance in doing so, because again, burning out can result in negative things just beyond your mental health. It can also negatively affect your GPA and therefore, become a very problematic cycle. So I think achieving balance is having knowledge of the field in the beginning. And what I mean by that is knowing the courses that you need at the outset so that you're not scrambling at the end to, take 20 plus credit hours to make up what you needed. And also knowing your limits each semester, each quarter, that you want to kind of have that steady state marathon pace rather than these all out sprints that can potentially threaten you with a bad quarter and therefore tank your GPA. So I think those are two important keys to achieving balance in this aspect of your primary application and path in medicine.
Right. Yep. No, absolutely. I think one thing that Austin touched on that I really like was kind of knowing kind of the landscape, and as much as you can, it is nice to know how folks, generally speaking, like to organize their 4 years, let's say, because you can start to figure out between your own strengths and what the general pathway is, whether they double up on certain sciences and not others, and leave the others alone because in that particular school they pretend they tend to be the harder ones, etc. You can start to figure out, well, actually I'm quite good at physics, so I may not need to keep that separate. Maybe I can do that with the other things. But knowing kind of the general landscape helps you, what other people do, generally speaking, will help you start to figure out what's going to work best for you. And don't be afraid to kind of change things, along the way. I think you should kind of constantly check in, every quarter, every semester, and say, hey, is this working, or should I switch up some things? And the more that you can kind of continue to check in with yourself about how you're feeling, how you're doing, how you're balancing, the sooner you can kind of get back to like a fully, or more fully at least, balanced life. It's really hard to get things perfect on the first go or perfect at all. But as long as we're kind of trending in that direction, I think you're doing a great job.
Great. All right, let's talk about MCAT prep.
Yeah. So, as Austin and I were saying earlier, these are things that just kind of come up again and again. Austin probably just finished taking some pretty tough exams himself, and it all kind of builds. It starts here in some ways. Well, in some ways it started in SAT, but in some ways for at least the medical part, it starts here and then just kind of continues. So again, use this as like as a way to figure out what's going to work best for you in the future. And please know that while these tests are extremely, extremely important, you can't minimize them. I think that sometimes the stress comes from feeling that if you don't score above a certain threshold, you have absolutely zero chance of completing your whatever it is your objective is, whether it's a specific specialty or that sort of thing. But please know that as a medical school admissions previous counselor member of the admissions team, it really is a composite. It really is a composite look at the person. So yes, is 100% on every test that you've ever taken the absolute best thing for you? Yeah, it is. But please know that if you are excelling in other areas, those can really help to frame kind of your complete application package. So and go into the test knowing that, go into studying knowing that, so that you aren't kind of overburdened by stress, because oftentimes even for really high performers across different industries, whether it's sports or finance or medicine, the more that you are consumed by this idea that isn't factual about it being kind of an all or nothing event, the more your performance will be, can be impacted. So really just kind of take it at a day at a time, and start to build these habits that you're going to use when you get to medical school and take some of the exams that Austin's just taken, or get to residency and take some of the board exams.
Yeah. I think Mo again was perfect at describing how to contextualize and approach this first, I would say, big exam that is a long list of professional school exams that you'll encounter later on. And for better or worse, you're going to become one of those professional test takers. And so the MCAT is kind of that first experience for you. And it's nonetheless a very stressful one, but it also kind of just can prepare you for what's to come. And yeah. So Mo was mentioning the other tests. I've just got done with step 2 weeks ago. And that's kind of now that it's the one scored exam in medical school, it's become almost like an MCAT of medical school for residency. So I definitely can feel what you all are feeling about MCAT, even though that was a little while ago for me. And so I think finding balance in those times when you start preparing for the MCAT is important. And doing that can be strategic in the sense that you pair it up with the coursework that'll help you not only continue to progress in your prereqs, but also prepare for the MCAT at the same time. And you do want to be careful about this strategy, because if you start taking physics, biochem, and other difficult classes while you're also trying to study for the MCAT, that starts to move your seesaw towards the burnout side. And so it's important to consider what Mo said about like what you're really good at and what you can work on, and see where you can find that balance in your coursework and MCAT prep, such that whatever you study inside the classroom can be applied to the test and vice versa. So that's one way you can tackle these two big things that are those objective metrics, but again, keeping in mind what Mo said about it having a holistic picture of who you are as an applicant is really important.
Congratulations on finishing that test.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll see what comes of it. So yeah.
Well, it's a relief just to be done.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, work and activities.
Yeah, this is a huge component of your life. I think prior to this slide, we've been talking about those things that happen inside the classroom with your courses, everything that's planned out for semesters on end. And work activities can really be your playground for building your story. And again, with everything, I understand who we're talking to. We're talking to people who want to be involved in anything and everything, because whether they truly have a passion for it or can build a passion for it because they want to be good at something, it's oftentimes that you find so many opportunities at your fingertips. But if you overcommit and underperform, that's one of the worst things that you can do, both for yourself and for your application. So in appreciating the work and activity side of your undergraduate life, you do want to find those things that you feel the most passionate about, because that'll also increase your performance in those. And it can be in everything from, the typical volunteering and the clinical perspective, to research, to, community events, to maybe even like a peer health counselor at your undergraduate institution. There's so many things that you can do, and you shouldn't feel limited or need to have a checklist in mind when you're thinking of that. Instead, I think it's important to have a set of quality experiences with quality mentors above all else, that can be sustainably made throughout your time in undergraduate.
Yeah, no, exactly. I would say the exact same thing. I agree completely about the potential downfalls of overcommitting. The applicants who stood out the most to me as part of the application cycle could speak both in their written part of their application, but also in their interviews. It is readily apparent folks who really took the time to engage in the experience, and folks who just did the experience as part of a CV or resume building activity. And one of the ways in which that really shines through is that people who tend to engage in activities purely for the sake or mostly for the sake of resume padding is that they'll often be descriptive in what they and sort of and speaking about the activity. So they'll say kind of what they did and what their responsibilities were, but they are unable to be summative in the contextualization of the experience for them and for the others folks who are engaged, whether it's mentors or patients, people, whomever. That depth of being able to speak about an activity only comes from hours put in, and there's only a certain amount of hours in the day, and so you can only focus on a certain amount of activities truly. The activities that kind of shine the most are ones that the person, the applicant, really cares about. I think, when I was applying, there was kind of an old adage of, ensure that you have a certain amount of hours of clinical research, kind of volunteerism, et cetera. And then it formed almost like some sort of equation that you had to satisfy in order to be accepted into medical school. And then when I got to kind of the counselor stage, I realized that while it is important to be well-rounded, and that of course can never negatively affect you the way that 100% on an exam couldn't, but the most important thing is to kind of have a genuine feel for who the person is, and you can only do that when they show you through their activities, because that's all you can see really until you get to the interview stage. Now as far as experience, please focus on the things that are most important to you as part of your application cycle, and don't overextend yourself. And that's really going to help you find balance, because you can focus on some things and ignore others. So sometimes say no.
That's great advice. I will say we do have a webinar on our website about work and activities, filling out that section, but also how to choose them. And one thing that our consultants during webinars talk about over and over is quality over quantity, and making sure that your work is not your activities and work is not affecting your schoolwork as well, but really finding something you're passionate about to put time into is important. All right, building professional relationships.
Right. Yeah. This is some of the most important things. I mean, I think that people always talk about networking and professional relationships as being important in the way that we progress in our careers, and it's absolutely true. I think the best way to do that is, again, to be genuine in the experiences and activities that you engage in. You'll find commonalities amongst folks who either in the research sphere or in the volunteer sphere, or whatever that you choose to engage in. And you'll find that it's not just your interest in that particular thing that you're mutually engaging in that brings you together. I think that more often you'll find that you have a whole bunch of other things that you have in common with this person or people. And that's how you find and form these long-lasting relationships that can help you. You can always reach back to mentors that you've had in the past, and you'll be surprised at how large some people's networks are, and or how small the world is. I'm still trying to figure out which it is, but the people that you meet early on will often know at least one person who could help you answer a question in the future.
Yeah, I think Mo did a great job of making sure that everyone understands that building professional relationships isn't necessarily a means to an end, right? It should come as an extension of your passions and activities. And really, in that sense, when you approach your activities with passion and the idea of quality over quantity, these relationships should come. And I think, flashing back to my time in college, the professional relationships wasn't the first thing that came to my mind, but it's been the one thing that stayed with me the entire time. And I still, get emails from my pre-health advisor and from some of my research mentors, and really they do have those answers for the questions that you would otherwise not believe, and you wouldn't have been able to even know that when you first met them. But nonetheless, because you put in the time with them and the genuine relationship that you built with them, it kind of carries through, medical school and possibly even beyond that. So I think of all the aspects of the application in your time in college or beyond, that this is one of the most important ones because it sticks with you the most. And as Mo said, it's a small world. So good and bad can be kind of learned through the grapevine, so to speak. So be careful about that as well, as you want to build these quality relationships. You don't want to use it as a means to an end.
All right. So now we're going to dive in to a little bit more about your application and what it means to be working on that, and how to balance life with that as well.
Yeah, it becomes a really busy time really quick when you're starting to fill out that application, because just like with school, this is built of many, many components, and they are all really important, as I'm sure Mo could speak to, being on the side of the admissions committee. So you think of the big things of your primary being the personal statement, the work and activities section, including the most meaningful experiences, and then making sure that you have those solid letters of recommendation from your professional relationships. And then down the line, once you submit those primaries, the secondaries will start coming, which is just a bunch of more essays for you to fill out there and express, who you are as a person and an applicant. So it's really important to have the right amount of time for this, because it can take a ton of time to put your thoughts on paper or on Word document. And it comes easy to some people, it doesn't come easy to others, but nonetheless, if you give yourself enough time, who you are will stand out in that application.
Right. Yeah. Time and really time to kind of synthesize, your experiences and your thoughts on paper is really difficult. And there's kind of no such thing as like a first draft and apply sort of thing. So you're going to go through many iterations of this. I think for mine, I went through something like 15 different drafts, and obviously the smaller and smaller changes as you went on, and bigger ones earlier. But it really does take time. I still maintain that the personal statement for medical school was the hardest thing that I've ever written, and it's harder than any of the writing or philosophy or whatever courses that you take, or that I took at least in college. It to distill yourself and your experience and why you want to be a physician in something like a page and a half or whatever it is, at least that's what it was when I was applying, space-wise, that they give you, is somewhat impossible, but you still have to do it, right? And that's going to take time. It's going to take time to figure out how you can best do it, and how you can best kind of distill all of your life and why you want to be a physician in such a small space. Of course, if they gave you an infinite amount of space, it'd be much easier. And then the same thing with these experiences. Austin and I were speaking before about the importance of choosing wisely. No pun intended. There's a whole sort of medical thing on choosing wisely for patients, but choosing wisely what you want to engage in, and you also need to choose wisely about how you want to express your kind of takeaways from those experiences. So the whole thing, it takes a lot of thought, and that thought takes time. So really giving yourself kind of the as much time as you can, and and I'm sure that there are other, I know actually for a fact there are other resources available on the Inspira website to help you out with this sort of thing. And then as far as the secondaries that come, as Austin mentioned, soon after, again, just try and giving yourself time. I think for me, it came a couple weeks after I applied, was when they started kind of trickling in. And there are kind of common questions that you can find online just by Googling. So before you get there, before they invite you to, write your secondary part of your application, you can find some of those questions and start thinking about them, if not start writing about them, and before you get the invite, to give yourself as much time as possible, because this really does take a lot of thought.
All right. Talk a little bit more about the application and finding balance there.
Yeah. I found that with the application, I mentioned over and over again how much thought it takes. It's really nice to be able to sit down with folks and to speak about it. I find this is, again, just figuring out how you work and what works best for you. For me, I found that I would often go in circles. And it would be hard for me to break out of a certain thought process without kind of some sort of externalization of that thought and input from others, that'll help me think about things differently. And so as far as kind of thinking about balance, think as much as you can about how you want to, express yourself and to present yourself, and don't be afraid to speak to others about it as well. I think that they can kind of more quickly help you get to what you're really trying to say, but that may be difficult to express right on the first time.
Yeah, I think to add to that too, this is where proactivity actually has like an objective advantage to waiting until later, because remember, the rolling admissions process is not a joke. And more importantly, you want that time to have the ability to, if you need, have those 15 edits of your personal statement so that you feel good about it. And the key to that is starting early and starting with the checklist. And I think this goes back to habit formation. And I know not everyone should be ultimately like extremely proactive in everything, because that can be kind of negative to your mental health. But at some point when it comes to this application, starting early is a way to ensure small wins in that sense, and not feeling overly pressured and having to force something out. And that may help with the creative process as well. So when it comes to these things and you're thinking about what's coming down the line, this is where I would, if I was going back and applying to medical school again, which I hope I never have to do, I would start with again, starting early. That's one of the things I would do again and again and again. And whether that's having a consultation with Inspira early on, just to get an idea of what's coming, or to just, like Mo said, start talking with people so you can get away from those writer blocks. It's really important to know that balance can come out of proactivity in this sense.
All right. Talk a little bit about balancing everything else with your personal life.
Yeah. This is not at the end because it's the least important, and it's often very quickly overlooked by people who are just going nose to the grindstone. I'm going to do as many activities and as hard of courses and get the highest scores, that your personal life quickly evaporates. But what I've learned through personal experience is that when that begins to happen, you become sort of this robot that begins to not have the right perspective on life, and the burnout will come, whether it's 1 month, 1 year, or as you enter medical school, it will catch up to you. So it's really important, again, to start early on thinking about how you can integrate your personal life into this flow of all the work you need to do. And it is possible. And we understand that every year these applications get more competitive. But again, by having that foundation of habits in place, you should have the time to build in things for breaks, for wellness, whatever that may be, meditation, working out, and finding those pillars and there's those anchors in your life. And if you have to, just build a time like you would for this webinar or for your meetings into your schedule. Literally put a block of time on your calendar and say, this is when I'm going to cook a good meal. This is when I'm going to just watch my reality TV show to unwind. This is when I'm going to work out in the morning every day or something like that, so that you can have a way to disconnect, so that when you're reconnecting, you're doing it with more passion.
Right. Yep. That's finding a way to disconnect so you can reconnect is something that I continue to realize and re-realize over my career so far. And I've always noticed that when you come back from vacation, somehow you're able to complete the tasks faster, and sometimes faster and better than you did before. That rest, which is really that rest is really in part sleep, but in part just not thinking about the work that you have to do incessantly, um, really helps you to, when you are finally refocused back on it, to complete it efficiently. Um, and so I think that one of the most important things about balance on kind of a day in and day out work or application cycle is to find times when you're not doing and thinking about work. And it's really the thinking part that gets us, I think, pre-med and, medical school and residency, that whole pathway, it just selects for folks that think about things constantly. And that's part of why I think a lot of, pre-med and physician track folks can become successful, but it's also part of what builds into this burnout part. And so finding a way, again, as Austin said, you can kind of mix and match it with working out or meditation or cooking a meal, to whatever works for you, to not think about work while you're kind of going through the process, is really going to help you be even more efficient at work when you kind of refocus and get back to it.
Fantastic. All right. So we're going to go into some tips. And then after that, we'll open things up for Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop it in the Q&A box, and we'll get to those in just a couple minutes.
Yeah. So, I think that this is a really, really good summary slide of the things that we touched on. Making sure that what it is that needs to be done on a kind of a time-based schedule is really helpful. That's going to help make sure that you know what needs to get done at a certain time, and so you know what free time that you have available that you can engage in other activities. And as far as kind of building habits early, building things, building kind of ways to live your life and organizational strategies so that you're engaged in work in the way that works best for you at the times that work best for you, so that you can build in the other things into your life. And as Austin was mentioning, setting goals and being proactive. I think that there are times where you can be almost too proactive, and it may be kind of self-defeating in some ways. But there are times where being proactive can be helpful. The application cycle is certainly one of the times where proactivity can be helpful. I remember, setting things like 10-year goals in medical school and things like that. And, while it's a useful exercise to give yourself some direction in terms of, where you want to go and what you should be doing now to get there, things do change. And so, also being open to, changing, circumstances, changing wishes for yourself and for your family. Things do change. So kind of set these goals and come up with time-based schedules and figure out ways that work best for you to kind of get the work done that you need to get done. But be open to change too, and make sure that you're, continuing to kind of check in with yourself about that.
I think the only other thing I would add to all of that great stuff is, when you're approaching these goals, again, you want to have an ability to have like passive progress. And that's what comes from these unconscious or subconscious habits that you can really have a solid time to begin to form and learn how to do in the beginning, because you're going to need these to carry through medical school as well. And so making sure that those habits that you do form in the beginning are healthy and sustainable rather than self-defeating and leading necessarily towards more burnout is really, really important. So thinking about those things that will give you a positive return on investment, even when you're not thinking about them, so that you can free up your conscious mind to think more about maybe more in-depth questions while you're still progressing towards those goals through the automatic habits that you're doing every day is really important.
All right, a few more tips and tricks.
Yeah, I think these are all amazing. Like Mo said, this is like these last two slides are perfect action items to think about how to approach your entire time at undergrad in terms of balance. And when it comes to like starting your research early, this is not necessarily meaning like go get into a research lab really early and be proactive about that, even though that's helpful because you can build relationships like that really quickly. But it's also knowing, again, the landscape, not only of your application, but of all the medical schools out there. So if you have the ability and the time and I guess the excitement to look towards the future like that, look at the MSAR, the tool that the AMC has to look at all the med schools and start building that list in your mind and use that as fuel to keep moving forward and setting those goals. And of course, you are never supposed to be alone on this path. I began to ask for more help than I could have ever thought when it came to pre-med, medical school, and I'm assuming beyond. And it's okay. You're supposed to ask for help. There are experts out there. Inspira provides these opportunities to learn from those who walked in your shoes not too long ago. And your institution also has those resources, those pre-health advisors, pre-med advisors that will be able to guide you on that path and provide answers to your questions so you don't feel like you're on a lonely island. And I think to prevent that lonesomeness from happening as well, it's really important to prioritize that physical and mental health by scheduling that into your daily habits. Because again, it can evaporate really quickly because you may not think, oh, this isn't getting me an increase in my GPA. I could have done like my lab report this morning or something like that. But in reality, the studies show, and my personal experience also shows that like when you feel physically and mentally healthy is when you're at the top of your game, both academically, socially, and beyond. So it's really, really important to find those things that you love to do, whether it's just go into the outdoors or go into the weight room, or it's simply just, take a walk and listen to your favorite podcasts. It's really important to have that as much of a habit as doing your work on time and trying to get the best scores.
Right. Yeah, again, I do want to I do want to reiterate that idea of, time to think about work and time to not think about work. When you schedule those breaks, I really want you guys to try not to think about, the next action item that you have to do, or tomorrow what time you got to wake up so that you can get XYZ done. Just really trying to be in the moment especially when because you're definitely in the moment when you're working, right? You're thinking about the work and you're trying to do the best job that you can. So apply that same kind of focus on your other activities, playing just for fun, video games or going out to play sports or whatever it is. Just kind of be focused on that and not the rest of the stuff. And I think that'll help you feel kind of more rested when you get back to the work that you have to do later.
All right. Well, thank you both for all of this amazing information. I know I learned a lot. I think for Q&A, the just question here is there any other advice that you think is important for this topic, or anything that you wish you had done more of or knew before applying to med school with regards to balancing life applications and school?
There was one thing that I think I realized a little bit later. I'm glad that I'm starting to realize it now, and um, but I think it would have been helpful. It would have been helpful even earlier, and that's just um, trying to figure out what you're interested in more so than where you want to be. So instead of saying I want to be a CEO of a company in 15 years, you say these are the kind of problems that I enjoy tackling. When you can figure out what the kind of work that you're interested in doing, and you can figure out your strengths, then you can start to figure out what sort of activities and opportunities and experiences help lend to that. And you may find yourself in a completely different situation or position than something that you had imagined, but you'll like it because you'll enjoy the work. So I think kind of going back to instead of thinking about a title, just think about the kind of work that this is actually stuff that I enjoy doing, and that'll also help kind of keep your resume and CV and experiences a bit more cohesive. I certainly know that when I look back at my CV, there's some stuff that kind of seems like it's a little bit out of left field, and that's just something because I kind of shrugged my shoulders at the time and said, sure, yes, why not? And that's okay to do sometimes. But just being intentional, I think, in the work that you choose to do. These are all choices, and and the work that you choose to do, being intentional as you can about the stuff that works for you the best is best.
Yeah, I think that was great. And I think Mo touched on a really important point of that, you can get to the same goal through multiple roads. Some are more enjoyable and speak to you than others. And the others that aren't as enjoyable can quickly lead to burnout before you even get to that goal. So it is really important to find what you love early on. And by virtue of that, you're going to be better at it because you're more passionate about it. And therefore, it's going to shine even more in your application and in your life. And I think personally, for me, looking back on undergrad, I think there's of course a certain amount of sacrifice that you have to do to go down this path, but there is a point where you should be able to say, like, I need these anchors in my life. And I would really like, if I could go back and do it again, I would identify that stopping point sooner, because it can become a really slippery slope when you say like, oh, I can add this. And like, maybe I won't be able to hang out with my friends as long, and then it becomes anymore, and then it becomes that you're wishing that you could, and then you get disingenuous and not passionate about the experience that happened in the first place, even though it might have looked good on your resume. So it's really important to know how to say no at the right point, both to yourself and to opportunities that otherwise would be awesome, but your plate is totally full. It's okay to say no.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for being here today. It was a pleasure having you, and I want to thank everyone else for joining us. And feel free to reach out to Inspira Advantage on our website via email, social media, however you choose, if you want to find out how we can help you with your application and balance your work, life, school schedule. Hope everyone has a really great afternoon.
Take care, everyone. Really nice to be here. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, Austin.
You too, Mo. Good luck with finishing up. That's so awesome.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.